Hi, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to my latest sketching session. In this episode, we're at the Word on the Street Festival in Toronto, and this was actually part of the Urban Sketchers Toronto group meetup. So I'm starting again with pencil, laying out the skeleton of my drawing. You can see in the little picture-in-picture that orange bar was the basic unit I chose for the scene, and the little notches on the drawing represent that basic unit on the page. And you can see now the tents are sketched in very loose form in pencil, and I just sort of lay the foundations for the drawing in pencil, and then I go over again in my Fude pen. And in this I have a carbon platinum black, um, which I've been using for about a month, and it hasn't clogged the pen too badly. You can see a little bit of buildup on the nib, but I know some people have had issues with this clogging their fountain pens. That hasn't happened to me, but I could see my pen's going to need some maintenance with this ink. But it dries incredibly quickly, and it's very color fast. It doesn't run at all, so I really do like the ink. And so this was an interesting exercise on trying to get people down really quickly. I'd see somebody want to sketch them and really have to go off of memory, because by the time I look back up, they'd moved on to a different vendor's booth. So I'm being very loose and not precious adding these people in. And the pencil was more for scale. I wanted to get the perspective right and the proportion and relative to the canopy of the tents. This scene I actually felt quite challenged to get the perspective correctly, because the tents themselves have nice parallel lines, so you can sort of see which way the perspective's working, but the slope of the street is sort of contradicting that, and so I struggled a little bit. In the end, I think the proportions and perspective work well, so happy with that. And even laying out the lines, I was trying to think how to be strategic about the sketch. I'm still learning watercolor, and so having very simple tonal strategy I find helps me. So in this, I wanted it to kind of be this band of light, being the tents in the sun. They're a white canvas material, so they were really blazingly white. So it was sort of boiled down to this strip of intense color above the foliage in the background, the interiors of the tents, and then I wanted the exteriors of the tents and then the people themselves to be the highlights of the sketch. And so you'll see I wet the page because I really like letting the watercolor do its thing, being a bit unpredictable. I've got my sketchbook on a steep angle, so I'm hoping the gravity takes over from my brush strokes. Ultimately, I want to not be in control of the brush as much as possible. I find that that's when the most interesting textures are created. So I've added a ton of water, and I'm trying to have it move around the page without, being deliberate with the brush strokes. And I'm still learning, but this is, I find, the most enjoyable part. And then when it's really wet, trying to spackle the page or spatter the page with paint. And then this, I'm also getting used to the idea that when the page is really, really wet, if you have a brush that's not as wet as the page and really saturated with paint, kind of like that red that went on, the paint behaves really nicely. And I don't love this liner brush. There's something about the bristles that I don't like. They never, I want a lot more texture out of it, and the bristles seem to clump together in one solid line, which is maybe good for precision, but I want it to give me that dry brush texture, which I've been struggling with. This brush, however, the bristles I think are a simulation squirrel fur, or maybe even real squirrel fur, although I'd be kind of surprised. But it behaves much better than the other brush. And so just establishing, we have this band of people and tents between two zones of foliage. And now trying to just add in layers, trying to maintain those highlights of the tents, maintain as many highlights on the people as possible, and then start filling in the backgrounds of the tents to sort of set it back and really have those people pop. And I find being strategic and having that large swath of just paint doing its thing really helped ground the drawing and create some interest right off the bat. Sometimes I get way too fussy. Like you'll see me go over these tent interiors over and over again, and it was just getting really fussy. I'd like to be able to treat the whole thing in one big move, like the foliage, but then managing leaving highlights for the people I find very difficult. I'm trying out a new camera angle and camera lens. Let me know if you have any feedback, if you like this more fisheye lens. You can see sort of more of the context and some of the mixing of paints. And now after the few initial washes, I like to go back over with the fountain pen and just pull out some of those shadows. I do like my line weights, and I flip the drawing over to get just better access to some of these curves. And now I've mixed up a bit of browns and beiges to start adding some details to the people. I have a slightly different brush that I use for this. I think it's a size 6, and it's I think synthetic bristles. They seem to be much more focused and good for details. And this is some of that fussy stuff that I was talking about. I kind of go into those shadows and around the people over and over again. It kind of gets muddy. So it was around this time that I was getting kind of near the end of my patience with fussing with these interior of the tents, and it was getting near throwdown time, and this is where I ended up. And I was quite happy with the contrast of the people with the tents. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't, please give a like and subscribe. It really helps my small channel.